the airline industry announced a goal of net zero airline emissions by 2050.
Pepsi pledges to be net zero by 2040.
Amazon is looking to achieve net zero carbon by 2040.
Now, Shell wants to be net zero by 2050.
Imagine you're booking a flight from Delhi to London. You have picked your seat, added your baggage, entered your payment details, and just before the final payment, a small message appears. Offset your carbon emission for just 500. It sounds absurd and incredible at the same time. For the price of a pizza, your flight suddenly becomes carbon neutral. No guilt, no sacrifice, no lifestyle changes. Just one click. But think about that for a second. The plane still burned the fuel, the engine still released carbon dioxide, and nothing about that flight actually changed. So what exactly did you just buy? So in this story, we are about to discuss that little tiny checkbox you just clicked and how it is connected to a market worth billions of dollars. A market trusted by airlines, oil companies, technology giants, and even governments, and all built on a simple promise that if you can't stop polluting, pay someone else to reduce pollution instead. For years, this idea was celebrated as one of the smartest market-based solutions to tackle climate change. But today, scientists, economists, and investigative journalists are asking a very different question. What if many of these carbon credits aren't actually reducing carbon? And if that's true, then one of the world's biggest capitalistic climate solutions might be actually built on a very fragile assumption. So how does it work, and why are so many people suddenly starting to question them? To understand that, we first need to understand climate change. And climate change is driven largely by greenhouse gases. And reducing those emissions isn't easy. Imagine asking an airline to stop using jet fuel from tomorrow, or a steel factory to produce more steel without burning coal. Although technically it is possible to an extent, but economically incredibly difficult. And thus, economists propose an interesting solution for this problem. Instead of forcing every company to reduce emissions immediately, why not allow them to fund projects that reduce emissions somewhere else? After all, the atmosphere doesn't care where the carbon is reduced. 1 ton of carbon reduced in India has the same impact as 1 ton reduced in Europe. And suddenly, this looked like a perfect compromise. Businesses could continue normal operations while climate projects could receive more funding and global emissions could fall gradually. Or at least that was the idea. And hence, so far, carbon credits sound like a brilliant idea. You emit 1 ton and someone else reduces 1 ton on your behalf and gets paid. The balance of the ecosystem is restored. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, carbon credits gained popularity as a global business among existing stakeholders. But then the problems arrived. As everything in this system depends upon one assumption, that every carbon credits represent one measurable reduction of carbon. And that's exactly why the problem starts. And the problem statement looks something like this. So, how do you prove that carbon reduction actually happened? Because unlike oil or rice, it is not tangible. Carbon credits aren't selling something that you can touch. They are selling a promise that somewhere someone is reduced carbon emissions because your money made it possible.
The science of human-caused climate change is fairly straightforward. When we emit greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, those molecules trap heat in the atmosphere and raise global temperatures.
It's possible that we could have very serious changes in global climate, effects on agriculture, effects on societies.
We know we need to cut emissions in half by 2030 to avoid pushing our systems past a dangerous brink.
While most of us want to save the planet by curbing emissions, We also enjoy living in a consumer society. So how do we get industries to pollute less without driving those industries out of business?
And proving that promise turned out to be much harder than anyone expected. Imagine you are planning to build a wind farm. You have already secured land, the financing from the bank is approved, construction begins next month, and whether carbon credits exist or not, the wind farm is going to be built. Now the same project also receives carbon credits. And here is a question. Did those credits received after actually we reduce emissions, or did they simply revert something that already was going to happen? If the project would have happened anyway, then no additional climate benefit was created. Yet another company can now buy those credits and proudly announce that we have offset our emissions to net zero. Scientists call this additionality, and many researchers believe this has been one of the biggest weaknesses of this entire market. Secondly, now let's talk about forest. Trees absorb carbon. That's a fact, which is exactly why forest projects became one of the most popular carbon offsets. But forests have a problem. Nature doesn't make promises or anything to anyone. Forests may burn, storms may destroy the ecosystem, illegal logging may continue, and climate change itself makes forests even more vulnerable. Now, imagine an airline that offsets today's flight using a forest project, and 20 years down the line, the forest catches fire. The stored carbon returns to the atmosphere, but the emissions from the airplane never really disappear. And ladies and gentlemen, scientists call this impermanence. And because fossil fuels can remain in the atmosphere for centuries, but trees can't guarantee they will survive that long, it is a problem. Imagine a government tries to protect a forest from illegal logging, which is actually great news, until the logging company just moves to another forest just a few hundred kilometers away. So the first forest survives, yes, but the second one disappears. Now, has the world actually reduced emissions? Not really. The pollution didn't disappear, it simply just moved to somewhere else. And scientists call this leakage. It is like squeezing one end of a balloon and the air doesn't disappear, it just moves to the another end. And finally, imagine one project reduces 1000 tons of carbon emission. Ask yourself, who should receive those credits? The project developer, the company that bought the credits, or the country where the project is located? Ideally, only one should claim it. But in some cases, multiple parties have claimed the same carbon reduction. One benefit, several claims. The atmosphere only counts it once, and thus scientists call this double counting. And once it happens, it becomes extremely difficult to know how much progress has been actually made.
Predominantly low-income neighborhoods and communities of color who live and work near these facilities now experience worse air quality than before the program started.
They're continuing to extract and emit fossil fuels in our towns, and it's directly impacting us as Indigenous peoples, people of color, low-income communities.
The overall emissions reductions that occurred through trading are nowhere near enough for the state to reach its climate targets. Meanwhile, the projects that do actively keep these trees standing or build new hydropower plants often dispossess Indigenous and local people of their land, taking resources out of their control.
Described as the most beautiful river in the Amazon region, a plan to build several dams along its length would transform this wide, shallow river, and it would flood forests and islands used by the Munduruku for centuries.
In essence, carbon trading forces those least responsible for climate change to bear the burden of its so-called solutions. Through trees, oceans, soil, or questionable direct air capture technology, offsets tend to rely more on carbon removal than just reducing emissions at the source. The world needs to reduce carbon on every possible front, But carbon markets give policymakers a way out of cutting greenhouse gas emissions, which is what we actually need right now.
At this point, you must be wondering, if these problems are so well known, why does the market still exist? The answer is surprisingly simple, because carbon credits solve a business problem. Imagine you are the CEO of a global company. Investors want better ESG performance, customers expect sustainability, and governments are introducing stricter climate regulations. But reducing emissions inside your business takes years. Replacing factories, changing supply chains, and maybe developing cleaner technology. Whereas, buying carbon credits takes just few days. For many companies, they are not a permanent solution. They are more likely a bridge, a way to compensate while they work towards reducing emissions. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, the market continues to grow. Not because it is perfect, but because there aren't many alternatives that are cheaper or faster.
Carbon trading is a multi-billion-dollar industry, with voluntary offset markets hitting record investments in 2021.
Carbon dioxide allowances soared 250% last year to a record high.
Many U.S. states participate in regional cap-and-trade programs. The EU, Canada, Australia, China, and other countries have them. Yet none have gotten us close to net zero.
The real question was never whether carbon credits are perfect. The real question is whether they are being used the way they are originally intended to. And that brings us back to where we started. Next time you are booking that same flight from Delhi to London, once again that little checkbox appears. Offset your carbon emissions for 500. But this time you don't see that as a simple purchase. You see it as a complicated promise. A promise built on science, economics, trust, and assumptions. Carbon credits are not automatically a scam and not a complete solution either. Some projects genuinely reduce emissions, while others have raised serious questions. The real challenge is making sure that every carbon credit represents a real, measurable, lasting climate benefit. Because in the end, the atmosphere doesn't care about certificates. Neither it cares about any report. It only responds to one thing: how much carbon we actually stop emitting. And maybe that's the question every company and every one of us should be asking first. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give your perspective in the comments. And until then, take care, and I will see you in the next video.